Hey TV fans, Board Now back with you. On this video I will be talking about the 4th episode of Dexter New Blood, and the episode is called H is for Heroes, so full spoilers from the start. And H is also for Harrison, and he is the hero of the episode title, or the apparent hero. It turns out there might be more to the story than just that, so I'll get into it. And I'll just say first of all that this probably is my favourite episode of this new season so far. I think there's some really good stuff with most of the characters in this. Even the Deborah stuff didn't bother me, and that's really saying something. So I think it's a good sign when the Deb stuff actually doesn't really bother me, and that was actually quite well worked into this episode. But I'll start with the title of the episode, and that is because there's an incident at school with Harrison, and it's a follow-on from what happened last week with him and Ethan appears to have this vendetta against the bullies. He has this list of bullies he wants revenge against, and Dexter's called to Harrison's school because he's been stabbed, and it turns out that's in like a scuffle with Ethan, where Ethan apparently was going after these bullies. And Ethan's in the hospital, but Harrison has been like injured in the scuffle, as I said. But the twist to this is then Dexter uses like his sort of past as like a blood spatter analyst to, you know, determine or to suspect that Harrison isn't telling the truth, because his background actually tells him then that doesn't quite match up with how things would have had to have gone. So he actually suspects that his son might be the aggressor, and we get this actually quite clever scene where him and Deb as the Dark Messenger are like sort of sparring with each other, and she's kind of saying, well, no, you're just looking for things because you're a psychopath, and Harrison's a normal kid, he's not like you. And she's kind of, you know, dismissing Dexter's theory on this, and they're doing this sort of mock style test where like obviously it's Deborah's not really there, but Dexter's like stabbing her from the angle that Harrison said he was stabbed, and he's sort of demonstrating to Deborah as the Dark Messenger then it couldn't have gone down the way Harrison said. So throughout the episode, Dexter starts fishing for like clues, and by the end he's convinced then he's found the evidence. Then it was Harrison who was the aggressor. Then he determines that Harrison stabbed Ethan from behind, that Ethan was like walking away, and that, well, crucially, obviously Harrison was stabbed, but then he stabbed Ethan first. He was the aggressor. And we see certain stuff. We see Harrison listening to like Molly Parker's podcast at some point, where she's doing an episode on the Trinity Killer. I guess that's quite a nice way to work, you know, the past and Trinity into this series. And at the end of the episode, when Harrison is giving a speech in the school, you know, about how Ethan was bullied and all the rest of it, and sort of shaming the bullies, we see Dexter looking through his things, and he finds out that Harrison has been using his sort of code, his Dark Messenger code, and that he maybe knows a little more than he's been letting on. And So that's kind of how the episode ends, but I do actually like some of that drama, some of the tension. As I said, there's some good stuff. It's the best use of Deborah so far as like the dark messenger, and yeah, it's sort of quite an interesting way to have Dexter like dealt in Harrison, and it's pretty good stuff. I mean, there's certain things to complain about. There's how fast things escalate in Harrison and Ethan's storyline, considering they only met each other last week, pretty much. And there's a little bit of melodrama with like Ethan's parents at the hospital, which is a bit over the top, but I actually do like what they do with the storyline when it comes to Harrison and when it comes to like Dexter's reaction. And there's this whole theme afterwards, and it's one of the things Deborah is saying, that you just can't stand the fact that your son's a hero and that you never were, basically, so you just hate that. And I guess it's just adds sort of drama and adds sort of, you know, kind of puts a bit of heat on Dexter than maybe he is just being jealous and looking for things that aren't there, even though obviously at the end he's proven wrong. So that's another nice little angle. We also get a bit more intrigue on the case and the missing girls in this episode, and towards the end of the episode we find out that Kurt may be involved, and that's because now obviously he's been lying about his son, about Matt still being alive, or that he you know, FaceTimed him and saw that he was still alive, and we're not quite sure what the deal is with that in this episode, but the police are trying to contact Matt and can't. And but by the end of the episode, because when we kind of get the sort of split between what's happening with Harrison and Dexter, we actually see Kurt with this young girl in town, who new in town. She appears to be a bit of an addict, and he's been helping her out, but then when she wants to leave town, he actually talks her out of it, and he's kind of, you know, taking her to this cabin. So the way it's sort of directed and the events of it definitely makes him look sort of sinister and suspicious. And obviously we've had this storyline of these young girls being like kidnapped and taken to a cabin, so there's definitely a strong suggestion that Kurt could be the one involved in all this, or at the very least has some sort of role in it. So it's sort of built quite nicely towards the end of the episode. It's obviously wouldn't be too surprising if Kurt is the one behind it. And we also get more from Molly Parker in this episode, which I'll say this, I think so far she's been quite annoying, and I think they've sort of hit you over the head a bit too much with like the whole true crime podcast, and there's just certain things about her character which maybe doesn't quite ring true, because like at one point she you know, she's talking about, well, I'm not a reporter, I'm a podcaster, print is dead, and sort of a weird thing to say, because you can still be like a broadcast print like reporter, but also just the way she acts, and yet she's running this podcast. Now, I'm sure there probably are podcasters like this, but it just seems like she acts more like a gossip type columnist sort of thing, like the way she like talks like scandal and sensations, and is just a bit, you know, very flirty and, you know, superficial for a lot of it. And it just doesn't quite ring true for someone who like runs a true crime podcast. And again, there's just something about the character where I don't quite buy her as a true crime podcast caster, but there is actually quite a funny scene with her and quite an amusing development, because it's confirmed that she's like been sleeping with one of the cops and sort of been trying to use him for information. We saw him flirt with him last week, and again, that's all a little bit convenient and too easy, but we see obviously Angela really getting pissed off with Molly in this episode and saying, you know, stay away from this prince, you're not involved in this case, just stay out. But later on, nearer the end of the episode, she actually comes to Angela, and it's a bit of a, you know, unbelievable type scene and played for comedy, but she brings some booze, and you know, they sort of have a drink together, or like she's drinking anyway, cocktails, but she sort of ends up like listening to Angela and actually gets her to open up. And once again, this is all a little too easily the way Angela opens up to her, but it's still quite a nice little scene, because Angela reveals that when she was in college, she had a roommate who went missing, disappeared, just appeared to be kidnapped, and she never heard from her again. And ever since then, she's been motivated to like track down and you know, search for lost girls and make that sort of one of her sort of passions, and probably why she got into law enforcement. So it at least paints a picture of why this stuff is like close to her heart. And so she opens up, and I think we're meant to believe that Molly has good intentions in the scene now. And by the end of the scene, like they've agreed there's a pact between them, because Molly has already got, apparently through one of her like websites, one of her forums, information on a girl who apparently she's found out is still alive and still out there. And again, this is all a bit, you know, too easy, and it maybe makes Angela look a little bit weak, but it's actually quite a funny scene, and it's a solid enough scene, them working together or agreeing to work together, and we at least get some background with Angela and why she's so invested in finding these girls and the whole case. And there's some potential anyway. It sort of gives Molly a bit more to do rather than just being like a bit of a nuisance as this true crime podcaster, and there could be like pretty good stuff that comes out of this partnership. So that's Dexter New Blood for the week. As I said, I think it is the best episode of the season so far. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. And I'll be back with more Dexter next week. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.